This episode of Author Stories is brought to you by the Writing Mastery Academy. Founded by Jessica Brody, author of the best-selling plotting guide, Save the Cat Writes a Novel. The Writing Mastery Academy features online, on-demand writing courses, including the official Save the Cat Writes a Novel companion course, novel fast drafting, crafting dynamic characters, and productivity hacks for writers, to name just a few, plus monthly live webinars on various writing topics. Go to jessicabrody.com/Hank to learn more and get your first month of unlimited access to all the content for just $6. That's right, just $6. jessicabrody.com/Hank. You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Blind, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is... Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am super excited to have two of my all-time favorite storytellers back on the show with me today, Nicci Gerard and Sean French, who write together. You know them as Nicci French, and I always look forward to having them back on the show to catch up, because I consider them my writer friends from across the ocean, and I always learn something new from talking with Nicci and Sean. They have a new book out here in the States today. When you're hearing this, you can go out and grab it. It's called The Other Side of the Door. And, I'm always surprised when I open a new Nicci French book, because you guys scare me in ways that I never thought were possible. and I love it so much. Welcome back to the show, Nicci and Sean.
Thank you very much for having us. And we think of you as our writer friend, and it's a great pleasure for us to be with you again.
I love it. Nikki and Sean, we were chatting just before we kicked the show off about what life is like in COVID, and this nightmare that we've all been living for just over a year now, solid. How has it affected you guys? Because we were talking a little bit. You guys work from home, and you have a great place that you work from, and it's everything that you want it to be, because you've kind of customized your work experience the way you want it. But there's something different about not being able to leave and not getting to interact with the whole rest of the world. And even though where you are is wonderful, you still want to go out and experience the rest of the world from time to time. What has this time been like for you guys?
Well, you're quite right that we're among the lucky ones, because we work from home and we live in a nice house and we have a nice garden. So on the surface, the kind of daily fabric of our life hasn't changed that much. And, we almost feel guilty about how lucky we've been during these wretchedly terrible times. But nobody who's got a kind of mind and a heart cannot be affected by what's kind of going on in the world and in their own country. It's kind of wretched, and seeing people all around us having terrible times, that's wretched. Also, just there's so many things that one misses. I mean, obviously not being able to see our children, not being able to see our mothers, not being able to see our friends, not being able to kind of experience culture, not being able to be spontaneous, not be able to kind of meet new people. And that thing about everything has to be planned. Nothing is unexpected. Everything is kind of, we kind of have to kind of arrange things. So we are longing to be out of it.
Also, but I think part of the way that Nikki and I write together is, when we're not actually writing, a lot of the way we think is by traveling around, walking around London, cycling around London, thinking about it. It's one of our great inspirations, about we inhabit the places where our characters inhabit, and it's been it's been strange. We have felt it's a bit like being cut off from your oxygen supply or something, I think.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, I was going to ask you that. How has this changed your creative process? Because, like you say, a lot of people do rely on new surroundings, new information, just the absorbing the world around you and looking for inspiration. How has this affected how you do your writing process and how you do your pre-writing, which might be more important?
Well, in a way, I feel like we're like a car or a plane or something that's running on its extra tank. It's sort of the extra fuel tank that it's got attached. So we're sort of like using up our kind of memories of places, and of course we know things like the things we've been writing. We know this very well, but we thought we wouldn't like to write another book in lockdown. And also we were I think there's one of the things that I think there's a kind of nightmare going on with lots and lots of people all around the world writing their COVID novels, writing thrillers about, a group of people trapped during the pandemic, and they start being murdered. And I think we've made a real vow to each other that we're not going to write a COVID novel. I think everyone, we want to get away from that.
But on the other hand, there will be, it's impossible not to be affected by this. When we've been back into, we've been living in our place in Suffolk, in East Anglia. And when we've been back during kind of windows of opportunity into London, it feels quite unfamiliar. The crowds, the jostle of people, even during the pandemic, that kind of weird sense of people as being dangerous to each other suddenly, that must affect our imaginations, but it's unclear how yet.
Well, what do you think about the next generation of books that will come out? Because, like you say, Nikki, it's almost impossible for this time to not have affected everyone in some way. Now, some people will write books that just seem to be very on the nose and, about a global pandemic, and maybe it's COVID, maybe it's, something else that we take a little artistic license with. But some people will be more subtle in kind of dredging up the feelings that we get from all this without necessarily, calling it a global pandemic or whatever. But how do you feel, Nikki, that this time is going to affect especially thriller writers and people that sort of play on our worst fears in some creative way?
Yeah, that's so interesting. And of course, I have no idea, actually. But I guess one of the things I've been thinking a lot recently is how, everyone has such individual experiences of the pandemic. On the other hand, we're kind of bound together by a sense of collective anxiety and a sense of collective trauma, if you like. And also, maybe this is more relevant to kind of thriller writers like ourselves, that kind of sense of that actually everyone is vulnerable. We like to live thinking that we're not vulnerable, that we're in control of things, that we're kind of the agents of our own destiny, etc. And something like this comes along and it knocks us in a huge way, I think. So people who felt impervious to kind of danger and change suddenly realise that they are vulnerable and they are mortal.
Also, I think that for people like us, the way we'd apply it to our own work is we're not going to write a novel about a pandemic. We're not write that sort of science fiction writers, whatever it would be. But in a way, there've been other sides of it that have been fascinating. Is people just what it's like in whatever the circumstances, the challenges of when you're forced to stay with a group of people and you can't leave, and so I think there'll be people. I think people there'll be books. I think almost the least interesting things will be just writing about something like COVID, but more it'll be what we've all been through, the things that we wouldn't have anticipated.
I think there's maybe an interesting argument here that could be made about the role of writers, especially fiction writers, in our lives. Is their job to report on kind of our our collective experiences, our fears, our whatever it is that we're all feeling together? Or is it a writer's job to distract us from the thing that we're all feeling? Or is it too simplistic a way to even look at the role of a writer?
That is the $64,000 question. It's interesting. I mean, what I'd say is, what you can't do, it's not that sometimes I think there's almost a feeling that writers have a duty to write about the quote, what the big subject. I mean, the obvious example, I think it was a terrible curse after 9/11 that quite a few novelists felt, oh my God, I've got to write my 9/11 novel. And there was some really, there was some bad things came out of that. And I often think that, say, someone like Don DeLillo wrote his best 9/11 fiction before 9/11 happened. It was somehow he was so tuned into the zeitgeist that he was sort of saw what that was coming out of. But I think there's a real danger in thinking you actually have to rise to the subject. So I think this. And on the other hand, I think just the idea of I'm going to write something because everyone's feeling a feeling of dread, so I'm going to write a very funny escapist book so people don't think about it. I feel worried about it. I don't think that's. I mean, my own feeling is on the one hand, when at the times where I've been feeling, like a lot of us have, there's a terrible dread and sort of name in a kind of fog of dread during this epidemic. On the one hand, I've not felt I want to read a novel about COVID. On the other hand, I don't necessarily want to read a P.G. Wodehouse novel that's just will be ha ha, so I can laugh and not think about it. I want, I'm quite drawn to often it's a time where you want to explore the dark side of existence, but maybe in an oblique way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that different books or different writers assign themselves different roles, and some are funny and some are escapist. I mean, I guess the kind of thrillers that we write, they're all about facing up to things that terrify us in our lives and kind of maybe giving it some kind of narrative coherence or kind of patterning it in some ways. And so we're definitely not just going to suddenly start writing kind of escapist dramas that allow people to forget about the world, because we're always kind of thinking about how to think about the world, I guess. I mean,
I'm just trying to think of specific examples. Take something like the First World War, which, how did crime novels react to the First? Well, I can't really think of crime novels about the First World War, but I was suddenly thinking you could maybe argue that the fact that someone like Agatha Christie came came to prominence in the 20s and 30s, that maybe I'm sure you could argue that she's as a kind of response to the Great War, about suddenly the kind of this respectable village life in which she grew up suddenly was wiped out and destroyed, and she suddenly realized there was a kind of darkness beneath all what people thought it was all so safe, and they realized suddenly all the young men went and were killed. And I think that maybe that so that's how you respond to something big, on a psychic level, maybe, rather than just thinking I'm going to write a book about a murder being committed on the Western Front.
Well, speaking of World War One, I think J.R.R. Tolkien's magnum opus, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, is a thinly veiled reference to the Great War, and.
Right. Well, he was in the trenches. I think
exactly. And these are he and Agatha Christie have two totally different ways of describing those emotions and those feelings, and both are completely valid and completely as far apart from each other as you could imagine. Yet both experiences that come out of that. That's fascinating to think about, the breadth of work that's going to come out of this COVID time.
And yes, and you hope it'll be like that. You hope it won't just be and what you want is not the work, not the things you're expecting. What you want to write is to give you something completely, no one was calling for the Lord of the Rings. You weren't expecting the Great War performed by hobbits.
I have heard there are quite a few Zoom novels being written.
Oh dear.
Oh dear God, no. Murder across Zoom. That's going to be the next thing. Oh man. Well, enough COVID talk. The other side of the door, the book that is debuting today here in the States. First off, what a fantastic novel! What an amazing premise. I loved it from page one. But help me understand. This is this a book that was previously published, maybe in the UK, that's now finding a new life here in the States and
Yes,
and
that's
abroad?
right. It was first published. It was the last book we did before Free Decline. So it was published in 2009 in Britain.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web. So it's very interesting that this is the last book before Frida came along. How do you feel like this book is different from the Frida series? And you guys really broke some amazing ground on the Frida series and things that we love about thrillers. But how do you differentiate this book from your later work?
Well, that's a really good question. So I'm going to give an answer, and I'm sure Nikki will then say she totally disagrees. So let me give my.
I hope so.
First thing I'll say, it was the last book we've written that's a first person story that's been told by, or is it? It is a first. No, is it not?
What do you mean? It's the last. It is first person.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But then we've written the first person after that.
Have we? Is that right? Okay.
Okay.
Right. Okay. But I think in a certain way, one of the things was about the books we were writing at that time. I think we were particularly trying to, at least with certain of them, we were trying to set ourselves certain technical challenges. For example, we did when we did a book called Losing You. That's a book that's like written in real. The book takes place in real time. We thought of it as like a single take film, or a book Beneath the Skin. It was almost like an experiment of telling the same story 3 times in a row, with a different kind of suspense in each section. And this one, we had the idea of, we almost felt this is as far as we can go as an experiment, because the idea, it starts from the main character Bonnie looking down at a body lying on the floor in front of her, and then we tell 2 stories, which is one, how did we get here? How did she get to this point of this murder having taken place? And secondly, what happens next? What does she do with this body? And we interweave the 2 stories. So it was we found it a really interesting challenge. I have to say, it's almost, sometimes people ask, as my, which is a favourite of our books, and very oddly, I feel a great affection for this book because it was.
Yeah, I think writing it and or planning it as well made our brains hiss with the effort, because it's like there must be a mathematical shape that I don't know of that would describe it. It's
Amoebius
like
strip or something.
Amoebius, yes, maybe it's like that, or like an interlocking spiral. So we begin from the moment of the murder and move forward, and simultaneously we begin to the events that's happened to create to set up the murder and move forward, and the two stories meet at the moment of the murder, if you see what I mean. So we're gradually moving towards the kind of dark hole at the centre, and it was very complicated to do, and we wanted to do it so that both the before and the after would chime off each other. And then we wanted to write about a group of friends. It was, and not just one person, but a whole group of friends, kind of who are musicians, kind of playing together, performing together, deceiving each other, loving each other, and chiming off each other in that sense as well. It was very kind of complicated, but incredibly kind of exciting and rewarding book to write, and completely different from the Frida Klein novels, which is, as you know, it's like a series which take place kind of in a chronological way over 8 books over a period of time in Frida Klein's life.
A lot of times, a book will start with a character. This character will walk on the stage of your mind, and they come, if not fully formed, at least with intriguing elements about them that make you want to get to know them and find out what they've been up to and what they're capable of in a lot of situations. What was it about Bonnie Graham that initially intrigued you?
I would say the first thing about Bonnie Graham, actually the name Bonnie, we've just got a new puppy and we've called her Bonnie. So Bonnie, I have this image of this little whiskery face peering up at me. So I'm going to try and disconnect myself from that. I think Bonnie, the first thing that we thought of with Bonnie wasn't what her character was like, or even that she was a kind of teacher and a musician in her summer holidays, or to a certain stage of her life. We had the idea of her looking down at a body and thinking what she should do next. So we kind of put her in a little flat staring at her body. And in fact, the reader doesn't know whose the body is for very many chapters of the book.
Yeah, also, I think one of the things is to make a big comparison of her with Frida. We were very aware as we lived with Frida and, book after book, that Frida is a sort of, she's not like us. She's cleverer than we are. She's a sort of alpha female, if you will. Yeah. Whereas Bonnie is the point of her, apart from she's being a musician, which we aren't, is she's sort of ordinary, and she makes this fateful decision to dispose of the body, and so she really becomes a sort of criminal herself, and she's very bad at it because really one thing we wanted to show how just act. Often in thrillers people, they need to get rid of the body, they have to hide a body, and they do it kind of quite effectively. But in real life, when you research it, if you try and dispose of a body in the middle of London, it's a very difficult thing to do. And we really wanted to show just the kind of messy, complicated practicalities of trying to conceal a crime and get rid of a body, and so especially someone who's not she's not prepared for this job. So,
she gets herself spectacularly tangled up in her own mistakes. I mean, she's a bit like the plot structure. She just kind of winds herself further and further into into the things that she does to try and cover things up. And we like that about her. We like that she's kind of completely hopeless.
I mean, we sort of love her, and we wanted to get, but it's she gets into terrible tangle.
So since you guys mentioned the dead body, let's go there. So Bonnie goes to her boyfriend's apartment and finds a dead body, and instead of calling the police, she decides to hide the body, and it escalates from there. What is going on with Bonnie? Why does she make these choices?
Well, in a way, this is where we to avoid spoilers, because in a way that's a mystery. I mean, in a way, there are, as we were saying, we wanted to try and create two kinds of mystery, and one is the question of why is she doing this? What is, and so that's why we need to tell the story leading up to it about, what has she got herself into? Why is she behaving so strangely? And then the second thing is the more normal thing is both the problem of dealing with the body, and then actually the question of who did this. Is it Bonnie herself? Is it someone else? So we, in a way, we wanted, that's really the mystery of why this very normal woman should be behaving in such a pathological and, in fact, criminal way.
And you tell the story in a sort of dual narrative sort of way. I understand why you decided to do that, because it's important to sort of unraveling the mystery, or allowing us to unravel it as we go. But as writers, when you're conceptualizing how you're going to tell the story, and you're looking at it from all the different angles, how do you manage something like that? Where you've got the two storylines. And I understand how your process works about how you write together, and I'll link up the other shows that we've done together where people can go back and listen to more of how you kind of work together. But how do you manage this sort of story told in two pieces like this? How do you lay it out so that you can understand it as you go?
Well, I think it was fiendishly complicated, actually. I'm not sure.
I love knowing that it wasn't easy.
All those years ago. But so, in a sense, we needed to have what the story leading up to the finding the body was, and what the story leading away from it is, and then interleave them in such a way as that they kind of satisfactorily played off each other. So it was a question of for quite a few of our books, we are quite free in the way that we let the story unfold, and we leave it to each other to kind of find ways along the journey. But in this one, we had to be extremely kind of methodical and careful. So it was literally kind of like almost like brick by brick of the story we had to lay down.
Yeah, also, and one important thing to say, that I think some people may be listening thinking, well, surely because there are two of them writing it, maybe Sean wrote the before bits and Nikki wrote the after bits. And we never divide things up in a sensible, logical way. As we've talked about before, we do all the research together, we plan the story together, and then but when it comes to writing, we just happen to write whatever's called for it on that particular day. So there was nothing logical about it. But as Nikki said, this particular book, in a way, partly it's a book about musicians, and I think one of the things it took a lot of work, constructing this book, is there's a certain kind of musical interweaving of the past and the future together. So we hoped it sort of really worked as a narrative, even though you keep moving between what happened before the death and after the death.
We were very clear that we knew that we were writing into something. It was like a labyrinth, and we were leading the reader into this labyrinth. So we wanted to be as clear as possible in leading them through, like the kind of piece of string to follow through, because it would have been. We really wanted to give it a kind of compelling forward motion, even though we were moving backwards and forwards.
Gotcha. One thing that I love about your books, and I don't think we've really talked about it much in the past, is not only do you write these fantastic main characters who the story is all about, but your cast of supporting characters are some of the best ever. How do you think about the other people in the story that are going to hold the story up, and what their role is?
So we've talked about this a lot, because in the same way that we say that our central characters don't know that they're in a thriller, and they don't really want to be in a thriller. They want to be somewhere else. Also, our kind of side characters, they don't know they're side characters. For them, they're the centre of their own particular drama and have to be treated like that. So each character that we have in our books, they need to have their own small drama. They need to have their history. We need to know who they are. And then I guess just in the act of writing about them and having them all interact, they grow.
Also, in this particular case, as Nikki was saying earlier, this is very much about a group of, it's about a group of people, and we were really interested in how groups work together. So they're sort of friends, but they're also, one of the points is they're all in different ways. They're different kinds of musician who are forced together because they've agreed to play at a wedding party. So while dealing with terrible problems, they're also having to rehearse together and prepare for this concert that happens at the end of the book. And so we were sort of interested in the kind of both the, there's something wonderful about when musicians play together, and at the same time we wanted to show the toxic relations, and the kinds of awful bullying and exploitation and even violence that can happen between people who think of themselves as friends. So we wanted to show different sides. So we wanted the different kinds of people who'd fit into that world. So the people who are the ex-friends or ex-lovers or children of friends. So we wanted to have a real variation in that group.
So this book, the Other Side of the Door, is debuting here in the States and elsewhere around the world. And that's a lot of fun, and we're always glad to have a new Nicci French novel. What are you guys working on now? What else do you have brewing that we'll be seeing in the near future?
So we finished a book called Unheard, and that will come out later in the year. And we're working on our next book. We're about kind of 80% of the way through the first draft of that. So there are lots of different things being stirred up by us at the moment.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to see what comes next. You guys know that I'm a huge fan of everything that you do. The Other Side of the Door is available everywhere now. When you're hearing this, you can grab it in Kindle edition, or if you still like to hold paper in your hand and read it that way, you can absolutely run down to your bookstore and grab it, or audiobook, which I think is my favorite way to listen to read you guys' book, is to listen to the audiobooks. It just transports me to a new world. Anyway, we're going to put links to all of those in the show notes of the episode. Nikki and Sean, where can people connect with you online if they want to dig into all the great stuff you do?
Well, the easiest way is if you just go to the quick way in is go to Twitter, and just if you dial Nicci French into Twitter, you'll find us.
Excellent. We'll put links to that as well. Nikki, Sean, thank you so much for taking time to come back on the show.
It's always a pleasure, Hank.
It's been lovely.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com. Are you looking for software that helps you bring your novel to life? Novelize is a web-based writing app which allows you to access your work on any device with a browser and an internet connection. Write from your desktop, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Just get the novel written. Say goodbye to sticky notes. With our notebook on the side, you can keep track of all the important information you need to write your novel. We keep distractions to a minimum, help you track your progress, and encourage you to write more novels. You can even use the same notebook for your novels in a series. Outline, write, or organize your novel by switching between modes. You can write your outline notes while you're writing, and you can move scenes and chapters around anytime in the organize mode. Choose between the dark and light theme to help prevent eye strain so that you can stay immersed in your book. Novelize, the app for writers by writers.